What's going on, everybody? I'm DJ Sixsmith. You're watching The Sit Down. Damon Herriman is here. We got Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You got Mindhunter. You got a little bit of everything going on. How are you?
A little bit of stuff going on, and good to see you.
Good to see you, too. I mean, you went from Australia to LA to now here in New York.
I did.
Pretty wild time for you.
Yeah. I'm going to London on Saturday. I'm just going to keep working my way around.
Just hitting every big city, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Just no downtime, you know, just basically talk about Manson for the rest of time.
Well, hopefully there's a point where I'll stop talking about Manson, but yeah, definitely for the moment, I guess that comes with the territory, yeah.
Certainly so. So what's the reaction been like to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Look, you know, people seem to love it, and I'm not surprised. It's a pretty awesome movie. You know, it's one of those things, too, that... you know, got an incredible critical response right from the Cannes screening through to now, and so much anticipation from fans. You know, there are a lot of Tarantino fans in the world, and to see that it's getting the same response from the fans that it is from the critics is pretty awesome. It doesn't happen too often.
Definitely, and also like the anticipation of what it's going to look like at the box office, because making money from movies is not an easy thing domestically. Internationally, we'll have some play, but like 40 million first opening weekend, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I gather they're pretty happy about that.
I'd say so. Yeah.
It doesn't quite doesn't happen too often that essentially a drama, an original drama opens with that kind of box office. So it's pretty cool.
Definitely. So I know you've talked a lot about this movie, but what are like some of the special little nuggets that you think about with this movie and just your time on the set and just the whole process?
Oh boy! I mean, the time on the set was probably the most fun I've had on any set. Really, you turn up to a Quentin Tarantino set, and it just doesn't feel like any other set.
It's a little different, right?
It's a little different. On this movie, there was '60s music playing, to get you in the mood. And there's also this thing where it's just really, really chill. Like I think he's worked with a lot of the same crew for lots of pictures. I think the script supervisor, this guy Marty, has been there since the very beginning.
Wow.
Right back to Reservoir Dogs. So there's just a really cool, relaxed. Everyone's kind of friends. No one's acting like anyone's a big deal. And I guess when Quentin Tarantino's the director, no one can really be a bigger deal anyway.
He's the guy. Yeah.
He's the guy. It was pretty awesome. I think for people watching the movie, they're just going to get. People of a certain age are just going to get a burst of nostalgia. I mean, I wasn't born when this movie's set, but it still feels familiar enough to me. I'm old enough for it to feel like growing up.
Absolutely, and that's what I was curious about. How much did you know about, what was going down in the 60s and just that old Hollywood world in general?
I guess I knew some of it. I didn't know the stuff about the industry, how it worked. Seeing DiCaprio's character kind of transitioning from being a star in TV and then trying to kind of find his way in this new the new kind of world that was being ushered in around that time. I didn't know too much about that, and that was pretty cool. I knew a lot about the Manson and Sharon Tate stuff. And I think for the more you know about that stuff too, it kind of helps. I think with certain parts of the movie, because there are you don't need to, but it's certainly like there are bits where you're like, oh wow, that's them, oh that's when that thing happened, and it's a crazy movie. It's not like anything else.
Definitely. So Charles Manson, very complicated figure. I could tell you many different things about him. You spent a ton of time researching him. What intrigues you the most about him, his story, and everything 50 years later?
Probably just that how intriguing he is. You can't put a finger on what really made that guy tick. I certainly wasn't able to completely, with all the, I've viewed everything I could find to watch of him. I've read books and listened to podcasts, listened to his music, did pretty much, a deep dive on that. And the guy was incredibly complicated, and there was a different Charlie depending which mood he was in, what day you spoke to him. He could even change mood within the same interview, the Charlie, the Charlie that existed before the murders, the famous murders that took place, was also probably a different Charlie from the one who ended up in jail, who kind of became very bitter and became very angry, I think he probably had several mental, disorders
Yeah.
and probably schizophrenic amongst other things. But yeah, he's it was a tough, as characters go for an actor to play.
Sure.
There's a lot to get your head around with him.
Was this the toughest one you had to do?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think so because there's not just sort of one thing to kind of latch onto that you might. I mean, also it's a real guy. If
Absolutely.
you're playing someone real, that has challenges of its own. It's helpful in that you've got somewhere to start, you've got someone to look at, for example, and kind of study. But he's particularly hard because, as I say, there are so many different ways you can go with him. It's not just like, oh yeah, I've worked him out. I never got to that stage.
Yeah, even just Charles versus Charlie, like the
Right.
two different guys, and like
Right.
the music stuff. I didn't realize that about him, but pretty rough around the edges in terms of like the music that he was actually doing. It wasn't the greatest stuff in the world. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, look, some of it, he had a couple of songs which weren't too bad. And, when he was going around in the 60s trying to get record deals and stuff, which is how he became connected with Terry Melcher's house, which is
Right.
where Sharon Tate is living at the time of this film. Terry Melcher was a record producer, and he had been introduced to Terry Melcher through Dennis Wilson from the Beach Boys. Neil Young was kind of interested for a while in his music, so he had a couple of songs which were kind of decent. If you listen to his audition, you can hear one of his auditions that was recorded, I think in '67 or '68, and it's on YouTube, and it's fascinating because you just hear that he's just so lacking in the ability to just kind of do the job. He just gets distracted so easily. He's got no discipline at all. He keeps kind of giggling and laughing and starting songs and stopping songs. And, I think, if he had actually been a bit more disciplined, maybe he had a shot at being a rock star. But he also had delusions of grandeur,
Right.
and he thought he was going to be bigger than the Beatles, and obviously that was never going to happen.
Well, just like putting his whole story in context, like, Brad Pitt comes out talking about Harvey Weinstein versus Charles Manson, and that's a big headline, but at the same time, like, it was a cataclysmic impact on the industry 50 years ago. So when you think about how it really just tore through the industry, how do you put everything in perspective 50 years later?
Well, I mean, what you hear from that time is that it changed Hollywood forever, and some say changed, LA and America even. It was kind of the button on the 60s. It happened in the second half of 1969, and so much had changed already, obviously. If you look at, I think looking at the career of the Beatles is actually a good way to look at how much changed. You look at the Beatles in 1964 compared with 1967, it's like 3 years. You look back 3 years from now, we kind of looked kind of the same.
Yeah,
you look
pretty similar.
from 67 to 64
Totally
Beatles,
different
it's a
situation.
completely different planet, you know. And I think that the whole kind of flower child hippie thing that Manson initially got involved with when he got out of prison in the late 60s led to this moment, which I think you hear about people in Hollywood suddenly buying guard dogs and getting alarms and getting protection, and everyone was terrified because it was months before they even knew who was involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just didn't know what your safety or security was looking like when you were going out.
Yeah.
Can't imagine that.
Yeah, no, it must have been crazy.
Definitely. So you've done a bunch of different projects in the past. You did a Leo movie, right? You did J. Edgar with him in the past. When you look at him in this movie, or just whether it's Pitt or him, like, what do you notice about those guys, or even just the difference between Leo then, between Leo now?
I mean, just that they're so good at what they do, and they do have that perfect combination of being a great actor, having that movie star quality, which, that's a rare thing, the kind of movie star quality that those guys have. But they're also really nice guys. They're really down to earth, normal guys. Both of them, really friendly, will actually come up and say hi, shake your hand. And they're the top of their game, and I guess that's partly what's so exciting about this movie is that you've got a Quentin Tarantino movie, but you've got Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt in it.
No question. And this is one of those movies that 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, like, this is going to have legs because of everybody involved, which I'm sure is a cool thing for you to put in perspective.
Right. Yeah. Totally.
No question. So we had Jackie Weaver here. I told you about that.
Right.
So when you think about your life in Australia, like being a kid actor there, and the differences between the industries between America, Australia, what are some of the most profound things in your mind?
You know, once you actually get on set and you're shooting, it's surprisingly not that different. I always expected it would feel completely different. I think, you know, there are certain things you notice, like there's a lot more catering in America.
Craft services.
Choices. Craft services, we don't
have that in Australia.
We don't have the tables of donuts and stuff. It's like
Aussies got to step up their game. Come on.
Find yourself a packet of peanuts if you're lucky. And you know, when you get to lunchtime here, you know, there's like tables and options, and it's like it doesn't end. It's like a maze of food.
And it's a lot of downtime for you guys, so you can hit up craft services a lot.
Exactly. In Australia, you know, we have great catering, but it's like this is the table of the food. This is it. You know, so that's one thing. Other than that, you know, there's just other things like this. The crews are bigger here usually. There's just more. You see more money in terms of the amount of people involved on the crew. But once you're actually working, the process feels pretty much the same.
I gotcha. How about Perpetual Grace? What's that experience been like for you? Because Jimmy's here, we had Jackie, and they've just said it. Great cast, great crew, but what specifically for you stood out?
Well, certainly. I mean, Jackie and I have known each other since I was 10, so that's a long time.
Because she was a big deal in Australia for a really long time.
Yeah. And she kind of broke here, obviously, with Animal Kingdom and her Oscar nominations. And but she was, you know, she was very well known in Australia. And obviously, still is. You know, back in the 70s, even.
No, it's wild, right?
Jimmy was one of the things that were the best things about Perpetual Grace. We've become such good friends from doing that. We'd never met before, and it's been just awesome, you know, getting to know him. But just that whole show, you know, Steve Conrad, who's the creator and writer and directed most of it, is kind of a genius. You know, he has this really unique vision, and when you're working on this show, Perpetual Grace Limited, the characters are so rich, they're all really different from each other. The dialogue is so cool to say. You know, it's just that dialogue you're reading and going, I can't wait to get to say it.
That must be a great feeling.
Yeah, and it doesn't happen that often.
No, I was going to say, I'm sure you get a script, you're like, yeah, okay, it's my part, whatever. But if you're walking into something like, okay, I'm ready to roll, that's a big deal.
Yeah. No, it makes the job, well, easier for a start when the writing's good, and also just fun, you know. It makes it so much more fun. You know, it's just a great world that Steve has created, and you're getting to work with you know, awesome actors. So that show has been a complete joy.
That's cool.
I hope we get to do it again.
Yeah, I'm sure. So you mentioned the bond with Jimmy. Who are some other people over the years that you've really had a strong connection with, where you're like, I love working with that person, this actor, this director, etc.?
Boy, look, there some of them would be, you know, probably some Australian actors over the years that I've worked with. Out here, let me think. Oh boy, there's kind of too many to name. I mean, obviously, you know, the obvious one that comes to mind would be working on Justified with Timothy Olyphant and Walton Goggins. I mean, those guys were just awesome, and most of my stuff on Justified was with one of those two guys. Yeah, I mean, that whole experience was a pleasure, but they just made it even more so.
Yeah, because how long did that end up going?
I think 6 years, 6 seasons. Yeah.
And I know you've mentioned, like, that's a very passionate fan base, so it's had some staying power too.
People love Justified, you know. It's one of those things that was never quite as big as, you know, like the Breaking Bads and Mad Men's or whatever, but gee, it had some really dedicated fans, and people still, you know, and people still discover it today. You know, start watching it now.
That's the beauty of the streaming world we live in, because you could have lived through that and just totally missed it, but now you get to jump back into it, which is cool.
Yeah, so true.
Definitely. And you did an episode of Breaking Bad, right?
I did do an episode of Breaking Bad. Yeah.
What do you remember from that experience?
Well, what I really remember about it is that even though it was season 4, it wasn't yet the show that everyone was talking about.
Which is crazy. Yeah.
I remember going for it. So I guess 3 seasons had probably aired at that point, which you would think would be well and truly into its hit kind of territory.
But it was a slow burn.
Such a slow burn, because I'd heard of it, and I think I'd auditioned for it before. And it wasn't really until a couple of friends of mine, I'd said, I'm doing this day on Breaking Bad, and they were like freaking out, going, Breaking Bad? Are you kidding me? I'm like, yeah, why? Why are you so excited about Breaking Bad? Like, that show's amazing. I'm like, okay, cool.
So that was really the first time when it started to resonate with you.
Yeah. And that was season 4. And then, suddenly it was like, everybody, all my friends back home, kind of like then it really started getting super popular, and all my friends back home saw it, and it was only really one scene that I have in it, but it was a cool scene, and it doesn't matter on a show like that.
Yeah, I mean, when it has international staying power in Australia, then the show's a big deal.
Right. Yeah.
And like when you think about that show, like it actually ended properly at the right time, and people are like, oh well, Walter White had to die, but like that was a show that didn't go on too long, and so many shows extend on too long, and I'm sure you've seen stuff that you've done, but it's nice when a show actually ends and people are like, I'd love more, but I'm cool with what just happened.
Yeah. No, I think that's so true. When they do that, I think Seinfeld was another example where they went, you know what, let's just finish it now, because we could keep going. They're going to throw money at us, but let's make it.
No, you just know when something runs its course.
Yeah.
So what are some things that you're watching right now?
I'm a little late to the game, but I just started watching Chernobyl. It's pretty harrowing. Have you seen that?
I haven't seen it
yet.
yet.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think Jared Harris is going to stop by.
Oh, how
soon.
cool.
Yeah.
Right.
But a lot of people around the office are like, got to check it out.
Yeah. That's about it at the moment. Yeah.
I'm in on Handmaid's Tale right now, and you want to talk about harrowing. I mean, it's intense.
Well, I worked with Ann Dowd from that a couple of times, actually. We did a show called Quarry a few years ago.
That's right, yeah.
She played my mum, and she's just the best, she's just... she's so good. It's the loveliest person, which is bizarre because she plays this horrible person.
Yeah, and that's the amazing thing. Is like you meet somebody in person or you work with somebody and they are able to transform into a totally different role. Like how do you do it even with somebody like Manson? Like how do you just stay in that mindset and just put who you are in real life just away for a little bit?
I guess that's all sort of part of it, Look, a lot of it is the other things that are helping you along. So like the costume or the makeup or the writing, or just the things you have to do, the things that you do and say are things that you, just the fact that you're doing and saying them suddenly makes you an unpleasant person, But I think we all have things we can tap into as to ourselves where we've been, angry about something or upset about something. It may not be the same things, but you can still kind of tap into that. And you've also, most people can have seen other people react in ways that maybe they wouldn't themselves, but they can take on some of that.
And it's one thing to get in that mindset, but to do it 10, 15 times with all the different takes, that's a grueling thing, I would imagine.
It is if you have to do, a couple of times I've done roles where you've had to play someone truly horrible, doing truly horrible things on screen. And that's not fun. No.
Was Tarantino like a quick take guy? Like how is his style comparatively to some other people?
Yeah. He like from my experience, he pretty much knows exactly what he wants, and you would do it 2, 3, I think maybe 4 times. He didn't do a crazy amount of coverage of stuff. He kind of, someone on set said, he's pretty much edited the film already in his head, so he's just getting the bits he wants, and it did feel like that,
And I know you mentioned you saw Pulp Fiction back in the day, but what are your other favorite Tarantino movies you've seen?
Look, Inglourious Basterds is pretty great. It's hard to go past that. I mean, they're all great. It's Quentin Tarantino.
And he's done less than 10. Like
I know.
It's wild.
I know. Yeah.
For a guy that's had such a major impact on the industry.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're really, you can count on one hand the amount of directors who kind of get you as excited as he does, and it's pretty hard to pick a favorite Tarantino movie.
Well, speaking of that, you were just watching the Irishman trailer before we got going. Scorsese absolutely falls into that category.
He's in the handful as well. Yeah. I got pretty excited watching that trailer.
I mean, you have to, right? With all those guys getting back together.
Yeah, it's super exciting, especially Joe Pesci. I love him so much.
Well, what did you see of Joe Pesci from the past? Like,
I became obsessed with him when I saw Goodfellas. I saw Goodfellas at the movies, and I didn't know him from anything. I mean, he was in Raging Bull. Right? I'm right there, aren't I? Yeah. But I don't even think I'd seen it when I saw Goodfellas, and I was just like, this guy's the best actor I've ever seen. I just became obsessed, and then he won the Oscar for that. I was so happy because I just think he's brilliant. I don't know where he's been. I don't know what he's been doing.
We're waiting for him. Even the fact that he's like second tier on this whole thing, it's like, Scorsese, De Niro, but Joe Pesci's great.
Yeah, that's who I'm watching for. I want to see Joe Pesci.
That's awesome. Well, Damon, it's been an absolute pleasure, man.
Pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much.
That's Damon. I'm DJ. We'll see you next time here on The Sit Down. Cool.
Cool.
Awesome.
That was easy.
Yeah, thank you.